hope you guys are doing really well. It is a bit of a grey, horrible week here in Devon, so I have been doing plenty of indoor training, including my Zwift races on Tuesday night that I love so much. But also I need to get outside, get some fresh air regardless of the weather, and I like to do at least one, but I mean preferably two longish training rides per week to kind of keep up my base fitness. I also just like doing these because these are the rides where I get to kind of mentally unwind and just relax a little bit, and I really enjoy them. Anyway, what I want to do today is talk you through how I fuel not just those longer rides outdoors but also my indoor training, and just talk you through some of the basics of fueling your cycling so that you can make sure that when you are riding you are performing to the best of your ability and you're not hampered by something as easily remedied as what you are or aren't eating. So the way we fuel our cycling is through burning carbohydrates, and the body can only store a certain amount of carbohydrates, and it can also only take on and process a certain amount of carbs. So you can see why there's this need to consume them whilst you're riding. So the amount that you need to use or take on does really depend on how long your ride is and also how intense it is. But there are a few simple rules that you can use to get yourself started. My first bit of advice would be that if you want to get the most out of your training ride, or to perform the best that you can, or just to really enjoy it to its full potential, then don't start the ride in a carb depleted state. You want to make sure that you fueled well up to that point. So I would suggest that if you're doing a big ride, make sure you have a decent meal with plenty of carbs 3 hours before, and that gives you plenty of time to digest it and not have, you know, like a food baby weighing you down whilst you're riding. There are reasons why you'd want to do fasted rides, but that's a kind of different topic and I don't want to go into that right now. My main advice, to keep it simple, because this is meant to be the basics of nutrition, is make sure that your carb levels are topped up to the max before you actually head out on your ride. When you're on the ride, you really want to focus on keeping your carbs topped up so that you don't hit the dreaded bonk, and that is when your carbs run out and you just simply can't really carry on and the whole world starts to end. But yeah, if you want to avoid the bonk, you want to make sure that you keep your carb levels topped up. So the intestine can only process a gram of carbs a minute and actually transport the carbs to your bloodstream, and that is why it's important that you eat little and often rather than just not eating anything and then shoving a load of food in. It just doesn't really work very well. So what you want to aim for as a rule of thumb is about 60 grams of carbs per hour. Obviously it also depends on how big or small you are, but that is a nice kind of easy target for most people to work towards. 60 grams of carbs an hour, you can't go too far wrong with that. So I'm going to talk you through how I would go about getting my 60 grams of carbs each hour. You don't have to use sports nutrition products, but it can be a useful way of doing things because most of them have the amount of carbs per serving really clearly marked on them. So that makes it easy to add up the number of carbs that you're getting each hour, because what you don't want to do is end up with a load of surplus carbs sort of swirling around in your gut. It's going to make you feel bloated, could make you feel sick. Your body can't process it either, so you just don't want to overdo it. There is no reason to take on more carbs. The exception to that would be if you're taking on two different kinds of carbs, so glucose and fructose, or glucose and maltodextrin. There is some research that shows that you can take on a higher level of carbs if you mix the sources like that, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I haven't tried that and I don't know anything about it, so I just thought I'd mention that in passing before anyone pulls me up and says, actually, that's not true. Anyway, back to the matter in hand. What I like to do when I am working out my ride nutrition is take my carbs from a variety of different sources, and what I use depends on how hard I'm going or how far into a ride I am. So what I like to do is I start the ride using more kind of solid or normal food. So I might take a white bread sandwich cut up into squares filled with almond butter, and jam. And the reason I take white bread is because it's easy to digest, and you want to avoid anything with a lot of fibre when you're riding because it's harder to digest. So I might take something like that, and a banana, and I will also take some bars like these. These have got 25 grams of carbs, I think. 26 grams of carbs per serving, and if I add up the amount of carbs I'm getting from each source, then I can be sure that I'm going to get enough per hour. You could also choose something like this. This actually has got a lot of carbs per serving, 47 grams of carbs per serving. So with a bottle of this each hour, you're not that far off from your target. On a long ride, after a few hours of eating solid food, it can sometimes become more difficult to actually stomach the food, or it becomes less enjoyable. Put it this way, after a few hours you might want to start trying a different strategy, moving more onto gels and chew blocks, because that can be a much better way of just really quickly just chucking in the energy rather than having to chow down. You really want to make sure that if you're doing a long ride, you do start eating within the first hour. Don't just leave it until later, because you'll already have started chipping away at your carbohydrate stores, and as I've already said, you can't replenish them any quicker than a gram of carbs per minute. So don't wait, start fueling within the first hour. Try and eat little and often, spread it out throughout the hour. That's going to make it easier for you to digest and just easier for you to tolerate the food. I mean, some people find it hard to eat on the bike. I don't. I just like eating, so I have no problem with it. But if you're one of those people, you can train your body to get used to eating on the bike, and if you just sort of take it one step at a time, then you will grow more accustomed to it. Another thing you need to take into consideration is hydration. Now, if you're taking some sort of carbs powder like this, you might find that you're getting electrolytes already along with your carbs. But if you're not, and you're doing a ride, say over an hour, or it's really hot, or it's going to be really intense, like maybe you're on your turbo trainer, you probably want to add some electrolytes to your water. When you sweat, you lose salts that include magnesium and various other things that you need inside your body to keep it running optimally. So if you just drink water and you don't replace those, then you are going to get out of whack basically. So look for an electrolyte tab to put in your drink if you haven't already got one with your carbs, and that's going to make sure that you stay feeling as good as possible. The other thing to note is that you do need to keep drinking, and like I said about some people finding it hard to eat on the bike, some people find it hard to drink. My tip would be to set a timer on your watch or on your bike computer to go off, say, every quarter of an hour, and whenever it goes off, you take 2 or 3 gulps of water, and that way you are going to make sure that you're rehydrating constantly. Ideally, you want at least 500 millilitres of water per hour. In practice, I find that really hard, because if I'm going on a really long ride and there's nowhere to get more water, well, what am I going to do? You just can't replace the water. But in an ideal world, that's what you'd want to do. This is so delicious. I probably should have planned this video because it's taking so long. I figured I'll just do a quick one before I go for a bike ride. But anyway, nearly done. The last thing that I wanted to touch upon is post-ride nutrition, and I figured I'd cover that now before I go for my ride, because then I don't have to do it when I get back. Basically, if you go for a long ride, what you do is you deplete the levels of carbs in your body, as I've already mentioned. So as soon as you get back, you want to replenish those carbs, because otherwise you will find that you feel sluggish in the hours or days following said ride. So the idea is you get the carbs straight back in your bloodstream as soon as possible, and you also take on some protein, because the protein helps your muscles repair themselves. Ideally, you want to go for a sort of 3-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein, and as a general rule of thumb, I'd look to take about 20 grams of protein within about half an hour of getting back from your ride. So you can get your protein from whatever source you like. I quite like having a protein shake because it's just so easy and it ticks all the boxes without me having to think about it. Otherwise, I'm dashing about the kitchen trying to figure out what to eat, and I've never got the stuff I need, and it's just a pain in the bum. So it's quite useful to have a protein shake around. Most people would say don't bother having a protein shake if you haven't done a particularly long or a particularly intense ride. because, you know, you're potentially taking on extra calories that you don't need, yada, yada, yada. However, having read the book Raw by Dr. Stacey Sims, I know that actually women in particular need quite a bit more protein than, well, firstly, than they're already taking on in general. I'm generalizing here, but also women tend to need a bit more protein than men do. So, if you've got a protein shake that doesn't pack in a load of extra calories pointlessly and isn't full of absolute rubbish, I don't see the harm in having one. So there you go, my quick guide to cycling nutrition. As I said earlier, you don't have to use cycling specific products. The reason I like using them sometimes is because it just makes life a little bit easier. And if I'm trying to get 60 grams of carbs per hour to perform at my best, then I know that if I add up the various products that I'm using each hour, I can hit that target easily. I also know if I have a protein shake when I get in, that I have checked that box and I don't have to stress about getting my protein in. Alongside all this, of course, I do make sure that I eat plenty of fruit and vegetables and I eat well. And I do aim to have decent meals to back up what I'm doing on the bike, etc, etc, etc. But that is another story for another time. I hope you found this reasonably informative or interesting, and I hope you're doing really well. Do leave me any questions in the comments below, and we'll chat again later. Bye!